After successful private landing on Moon, more missions to follow. An American private space company called Firefly Spire Aerospace successfully landed its spacecraft on Moon on Sunday. Aerospace, the first of several arrivals that the lunar surface is expecting this year. Firefly's Blue Ghost mission is the second time that a private space company has landed on the Moon. After intuitive mechanics, Odysseus spacecraft achieved this feat last year. NASA is currently facilitating a host of private missions to the Moon as it tries to build a larger ecosystem of space transportation companies in anticipation of more frequent travels to the celestial body in the coming years. The first rounds of the private space missions are carrying a variety of scientific instruments, mostly those of NASA, to further understanding of the Moon's surface and its surroundings. Blue Ghost has taken 10 instruments that will test robotic drilling technology, carry out studies of the surface and subsurface characteristics, and explore dust mitigation methods, among other things. These will be operational for roughly one lunar day or about 14 Earth days. On March 14, the mission is hoping to capture high definition images of a solar eclipse on the Moon, with the Earth slated to come between its satellite and the Sun. The Blue Ghost mission does not have a rover to move around on the Moon's surface, meaning that the payloads deployed from the lander will remain static. The spacecraft has landed some 20 degrees north of the lunar equator on the side of the Moon that always faces Earth. The site is known to have been hit by a large asteroid 3 billion years ago. Flyer, Firefly is the third private operator to have sent a moon mission under the special NASA program called the Commercial Lunar Payload Services (CLPS). Commercial Lunar Payload Services (CLPS). More than a dozen space companies have been contracted by NASA so far to carry out scientific sorties to the moon. Although NASA will likely be sending the majority of the payloads in these missions, the companies are free to take payloads of other parties such as universities, research institutions, private corporations, and even other countries. CLPS is aimed at expediting the exploration of the moon and building capacities in the private sector to undertake complex space missions. This is part of the NASA's larger and more ambitious Artemis mission that aims to establish long-term human presence on the moon, exploit its natural resources, and use it as a base for further exploration of deep space. The first flight to moon under the CLPS initiative was launched in January last year, with Astrobotic Technologies sending its Peregrine mission. The mission could not reach the moon due to its technical problems. Intuitive Mechanics' Odysseus spacecraft, launched just a month later, became the first private mission to reach the moon. Although its landing was not perfect, the spacecraft was unable to slow down adequately before landing, and at least one of its landing legs broke on impact, but it still managed to stay upright and relayed data to back to the control station. Sunday's landing of the Black Ghost mission was almost flawless, which prompted Firefly's Aerospace to claim it had become the first private company to successfully land on the moon. The missions carried out so far has been fairly straightforward, but future missions plan to have rovers and returning modules as well. The entry of private operator ensures a greater frequency of trips to the moon and consequently the deployment of a larger number of scientific instruments. Even as Ghost landed on Sunday, the next CLPS mission is already on its way, with Intuitive Missions launching in its Athena spacecraft on February 26. Athena is supposed to land at relatively unexplored southern pole of the moon on March 6. A Japanese private mission is also on its way to the moon right now. The Hakuto R2 mission 2 by a company called iSpace Inc. was launched by the same SpaceX rocket as the Blue Ghost in a unique double moonshot on January 15. It is taking a different, more energy efficient route to the moon and is scheduled to land in May or June. Japan's first and the only successful moon landing mission, called the SLIM, has also taken a similar extended route last year. Hakuto R has a lander called Resilience and a rover called Micro. Hakuto R's first mission in 2023 has been successful. A Japanese private mission is also on its way to the moon right now. The Hakuto R Mission 2 by a company called iSpace Inc. Hakuto R Mission 2, Hakuto R Mission 2 by a space company called iSpace Inc. was launched by some SpaceX rocket as Blue Ghost in a unique double moonshot on January 15. It's taking a different route. Japan's first and only successful moon landing mission called SLIM had also taken a similar extended route last year. Hakuto R has a lander called Resilience and a rover called Micro. There could be a few more moon landings this year, though their schedules are not firmed up yet. Astrobotic Technologies has planned to send its mission later this year, and Intuitive Machines might also launch its third mission, IM-3, by the year end. India's agricultural farm exports have posted above average growth, with basmati rice, spices, coffee, tobacco shipments set to cross new highs in 24-25. Black Ghost Mission Sunday's landing of the Black Ghost mission or Blue Ghost mission. Firefly's Blue Ghost mission is the second time that private space company has landed on the moon after Intuitive Machines Odysseus spacecraft achieved this feat last year. Intuitive Machines Odysseus spacecraft. India's agricultural exports have risen 6.5% from $35.2 billion in April to December 23 to $37.5 billion in April to December 24. That's more than 1.9% overall increase in the country's merchandise exports for this period. That said, the difference is even starker in imports. While India's total goods imports was 7.4% over April to December 23, there was an 18% rise in imports of farm produce for the same period. The agricultural trade surplus has thus reduced from $10 billion in April to December to $8.2 billion for the corresponding 9 months of the current fiscal. Narrowing surplus, India is a net agri commodities exporter with the value of its outward shipments consistently exceeding its exports. However, the net surplus, which peaked at $27.7 billion in 2013-14, shrunk to $8.1 billion by 2016-17. It rose thereafter to $20.2 billion in 2020-21 before falling to $16 billion in 2023-24. It is said to further decline this fiscal. The expansion or narrowing of the surplus has largely to do with exports. These dipped during the initial years of the Narendra Modi led government from $43.3 billion in 2013-14 to $35.6 billion in 2019-20, even as imports climbed from $15.5 billion to $21.9 billion. This was linked to crash in international commodity prices. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization Food Price Index, base period 2014 6 to 16, plunged from an average of 119.1 to 96.4 points between 2013-14 to 2019-20. Low world prices made India's agricultural exports less cost competitive and its farmers more vulnerable to cheaper imports. But the supply disruptions post the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian invasion of Ukraine led to global price recovery as the benchmark FOO index soared to an average of 133.1 in 2021-22 and 140.6 points in 22-23. India's agri-exports surged to $50.2 billion and $53.2 billion in these respective years, with the index easing somewhat after that to 121.5 in 23-24 and 123.4 in 24-25. Exports too have come off all-time of all their all-time highs. The accompanying tables show India's top agricultural export and import items by dollar value. The number one export commodity, marine products, has registered a drop from $7.8 billion in 21-22 to and $8.1 billion in 22-23 to $7.4 billion in 23-24. The fall has persisted in the ongoing fiscal as well. India's marine exports of fish frozen shrimp account for roughly two-thirds, are mainly to the US 34.5% share in 23-24, China 19.6%, and the European Union 14%. With the US being the biggest market, any move by President Donald Trump to impose tariffs can further hurt Indian seafood exports. Sugar has also taken a hit, with exports more than halving, halving from $5.8 billion in 22-23 to $2.8 billion in 23-24. Its exports and also that of wheat from $2.1 billion in 21-22 and $1.5 billion in 22-23 to hardly anything since. Having suffered from government restrictions following concerns over domestic availability and food inflation, exports of rice have continued to boom. That includes non-basmati, on which various curbs, from an outright ban to white rice to a 20% duty on parboiled grain shipments, have gradually lifted. The ban on broken rice exports remains, but the value of non-basmati shipments is still poised to be be quite close to 6.1 to 6.4 billion dollar highs of 21-22 and 22-23. Exports of basmati rice and also spices, coffee, and tobacco are likely to scale new records in 24-25. Droughts in Brazil and typhoon activity in Vietnam have given a boost to coffee exports from India. Crop failures in Brazil and Zimbabwe have likewise benefited Indian tobacco exporters. India has also consolidated its position as the world's leading exporter of basmati rice, chili, mint products, cumin, turmeric, coriander, fennel, etc. India's agricultural imports are dominated by two commodities, edible oils and pulses. Imports of pulses has come down considerably from $3.9 billion in 2015-16 to $4.2 billion in 26-2017. The number one export commodity, marine products, has registered a drop from $7.8 billion to $8.1 billion to $7.4 billion in 23-24. India's marine products, of which frozen shrimp account for roughly two-thirds, are mainly to the US and the European Union. While the US being the biggest market, any move by President Donald Trump to impose tariffs can further hurt Indian seafood exports. Sugar has also taken a hit, with exports more than halving from $5.8 billion in 22-23 to $2.8 billion in 23-24. Its export also and also that of wheat have suffered from government restrictions following concerns over domestic availability and food inflation. Exports of rice have continued to boom. That includes non-basmati rice, on which various curbs, from an outright ban to on white rice to 20% duty on parboiled grain shipments, have been gradually lifted. The ban on broken rice export remains, but the value of non-basmati shipment is still poised to be quite close to its $6.4 billion highs of 21-22 and 22-23. Exports of basmati rice and also spices, coffee and tobacco are likely to scale new records in 24-25. Drought in Brazil and typhoon activity in Vietnam have given a boost to coffee exports from India. Crop failures in Brazil and Zimbabwe have likewise benefited Indian tobacco exporters. India has also consolidated its position as the world's leading exporter of basmati rice, chili, mint products, cumin, turmeric, coriander, fennel, etc. India's agricultural imports are dominated by two commodities, edible oil and pulses. Import of pulses has come down considerably from $3.9 billion to $4.2 billion, and $4.2 billion in 2017 to an average of $1.7 billion ending 22-23. That underwent a reversal with a poor crop in 23-24. The current fiscal could end with an import crossing $5 billion for the first time. In edible oil, the outgo during 24-25 is expected to be the highest since 21-22, $19 billion, and 22-23, $20 billion, which was basically courtesy of the war in Ukraine that drove up global prices. In spices, India is both an exporter and an importer. In 23-24, India's imports of cardamom exceeded its corresponding exports of 17,000 tons and 7,000 tons. In other words, it was a net importer of these two traditional plantation species. This even as it has become a preeminent exporter of chili and non-traditional seed species. As far as cotton goes, the BT revolution, the planting of genetically modified hybrids, turned India into a world second largest exporter after the US. The country's cotton exports were valued at $4.3 billion, $3.7 billion, $3.6 billion in 2011-12, 12-13, and 13-14 respectively. That has collapsed to $781.4 million in 22-23 and $1.1 billion in 23-24. During April to December 24, India's cotton exports were at $575 million, not only 8.1% lower than for the same period of 23, but its imports of $918 million were up 84.2%. Thus, from an exporter, India is today a net importer of cotton. As far as cotton go, BT revolution, planting of genetically modified hybrids, turned India into the world's second largest exporter after the US. The country's cotton exports were valued at $4.3 billion. Correction. $4.3 billion, $3.7 billion, and $3.6 billion in 2011-12, 2012-13, and 2013-14 respectively. That had collapsed to $781.4 million in 22-23 and $1.1 billion in 23-24. Why olive ridleys came to Odisha nesting ground in large numbers this year? Olive ridley turtles returned to the Rushikonda Roorkee in Odisha's Gandam district for a 10-day mass nesting event last month after having stayed away last year. Nearly 7 lakh olive ridleys laid eggs at the nesting ground between February 16 and February 25. The number of turtles was more than in 2023 when around 6.37 lakh laid eggs in the same stretch. Olive ridleys, Lepidochelys ovalicia, are among the smallest and most abundant of all sea turtles. Are the smallest and most abundant of all sea turtles, which inhabit warm waters of Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans. Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans. Individuals of the species, which get its name from the characteristic heart-shaped olive green shells, can grow to about 2 feet in length and weigh about 50 kg. The turtles reach maturity around age 14 and, like other sea turtles, are likely long lived. These marine reptiles are best known for their unique mass nesting, known as Arribada, Spanish for arrival. Thousands of females swarm at the same beach to lay eggs. Arribada nesting behavior is typical of the genus Lepidopterus, which includes Kemp's Ridley and Olive Ridley sea turtles. More than 600,000 females could typically emerge from the sea over a period of 5 to 7 days to lay eggs in 1.5 foot deep conical nest that they dig in the beach sand with their hind flippers. Aribada nesting is seen only at a few beaches. The largest olive ridley mass nesting site are at Rushikulya and Gahirmatha in Kendrapara district in Odisha, followed by beaches in Mexico and Costa Rica. Experts say Rushikulya and Gahirmatha make the ideal mass nesting sites due to favorable weather conditions such as warm sandy beaches and an undisturbed coastal ecosystem. Warm sandy beaches and an undisturbed coastal ecosystem. Marine scientist Pratap Mohanty of the Dharinder University, Keonjhar, who studied the nesting behavior of the turtles when he was with the Department of Marine Sciences at the Behrampur University, said the mass nesting at Rushikulya mostly occurs to the north of the Rushikulya river mouth, where conditions in the near shore water and the beach sand are favorable both before and during the nesting event. The turtles prefer beaches with a mild slope, medium width, and a greater percentage of medium sand with low salinity, Professor Mohanty said. Lower wind speed, low to moderate waves, and moderate west southward current before nesting are conducive for the turtles to inhabit the coastal waters in large numbers during the mass nesting. Enhancement in wind speed generates relatively higher wave height, helping the sea turtles to move to the beach. Odisha coast typically witnesses Aribada in the first quarter of the year. The arrivals in large numbers this year could be due to several factors. Sunny Kokhor, a divisional forest officer in Behrampur, said absence of rain this February would have meant less erosion, creating sufficient space near the river mouth for the turtles to rest in large numbers. A second reason is the beach gradient, a slope of a beach from the top of the water's edge, which is less this year compared to the previous years. Basudev Tripathi, a senior scientist at the Zoological Survey in India at Pune, agreed that Kulya Beach provided enough space for large number of olive ridleys this year. Gahirmatha too might witness mass nesting soon. The fact that nesting has taken place in mid-February could suggest help more eggs to hatch. The eggs will hatch around 50 days from now. Fewer eggs will be lost due to higher temperatures and coastal erosion. Later the nesting takes place, the more the eggs that are lost to erosion, which intensifies in April. Asked about the absence of Aribada in 24, in some years sea turtles do skip nesting. We do not know the exact reason for this. Mamta claims voter fraud. Can two electors have identical epic numbers? West Bengal Chief Minister Mamta Banerjee has raised concerns over the integrity of the electoral roll, flagging several instances of electorals having the identical elector's photo identity card. Epic Numbers, the Trinamool Congress chief last week, accused the BJP of using Election Commission of India's to create fake voters for the next year's assembly election in West Bengal. The ECI on Sunday accepted that some electors do have identical epic numbers but maintained that this does not imply the existence of fake voters. The Registration of Electors Rules 1960 provide for an elector's photo identity card to be issued to all electors in order to prevent impersonation. State governments began issuing epics from 1993 onwards. The epic is only an identity document. It does not give the holder the right to vote, which is only available to those whose names are in the electoral roll of their constituency. An epic contains an elector's name, age, residence, and particulars specified by the ECI, a photograph of the elector, and the facsimile signature of the registration officer. As per the ECI's manual on electoral rolls, every epic is issued under a unique epic number and alphanumeric series with three alphabetical codes followed by a seven-digit number. Three alphabetical codes followed by a seven-digit number. This number includes a functional unique serial number for each assembly constituency. Started in 2017, epics have been issued using ECI's Aeronet portal. The 23 manual says a unique epic number is allotted to every elector. The TMC has said many electors have the same epic number, alleging that the BJP and EC were adding fake voters to West Bengal's electoral rolls. The ECI on Sunday said that while there were indeed duplicate epic numbers, this does not mean existence of fake voters. It said before the Aeronet platform was introduced, different states were using the same alphanumeric series before the epic cards issued by them. This allowed for duplication of epic numbers. Although other details on the identity document would be different. According to ECI, irrespective of the epic number, any elector can cast a vote only at the designated polling station in the respective constituency in their state UT, where they are enrolled in the electoral roll and nowhere else. The Commission assured the duplication would be rectified soon. ECI sources said that the new epic numbers would be issued to those with numbers that have been duplicated. India is a net agri-commodities exporter. India is a net agri-commodities exporter. The agricultural trade surplus has reduced $10 billion to $8.2 billion. Ola Electric to slash 1,000 jobs in second restructuring in 5 months. What Hindi baiters don't get: how can divisive politics of the past threaten to become our future? I am both sad and outraged by the diatribes against Hindi by those who speak Indian English and shout against Hindi imposition. They include many educated Indians from the Hindi heartland. This is a cop-out. The English used here, one can see, has seeked smoothly from being the language of India's former colonial masters towards being the code that identifies the unique certified thought leaders in India from science to arts, philosophy to warfare. India being 20 before the 20th century was deeply multilingual nation. Each Each region had a language, each language had its own tradition of oral literature in area dialects that fed into the pool. And then there was a particularly fractious history of Hindi versus Urdu. For long, Hindi, Hindvi, Hindustani spoken form had been the people's language in the area. Controversy and bitterness first began to be crystallized after the Bhaka Munshis, appointed by the British, carved out two languages from Hindustani. One was Hindi written in Devanagari, script borrowed from Sanskrit, other was Urdu in a slightly indigenized version of the Persian script. Hindi and Urdu thereafter were propagated through school books and government correspondence as languages of Hindus and Muslims in that order. The term bhasha that the anti-Hindi lobbyists are using freely to underscore its Hindu roots, backed perhaps unknowingly by the venerable JLF, is baffling. Bhasha or Bhakha has always been the term for an inclusive melange of dialects spoken by the northern plains. Braj, Avdhi, Korvi, Maithili, Bhojpuri, among others. Around 13th century, this prototype of Hindi had begun trickling slowly down south thanks to the two-way momentum of the Ramanand introduced the North Bhakti. No one saw it as an imposition either in the north or the south. Since then, there was a regular flow of pilgrims and sadhus chanting and singing the poems of the northern Bhakti poets. Classical musicians started singing the kritis of the hundred poets and uh, Vyagakras, the Deccani poets, gave it more muscle, and Mumbai became the capital of visual entertainment. The hybridized Hindi entered Bollywood and TV, like Elizabeth English. The Hindi-Urdu mix in films like Mughal-e-Azam and Garam Hawa has always been more of a liquid bubbling with steam, fumes, and certain fury against the system deemed divisive and supremacist. The real difference between this easy camaraderie of early independence year, when my generation in the north studied in the Hindi medium, and our present diglossia is that today's English enters the mind of Indian children before they finished setting down their first language. So they end up not with a mother tongue learnt at home and a language learned simultaneously in school, but a single competence that is less optimized for picking a local lore and street smart phraseology that is more suited for an with ultimate aim, a well paid job. It is a short route for the rich, a long one for the poor. It is a diglossia that is killing local dialects, more of which had no script except Kaithi and Maithili, now mostly dead in those areas. The Hindi that the government today wishes to crown as the national language is a different kettle of fish. It is firmly moved to Sanskrit with all its casteist baggage intact, and its highly associational vocabulary is being used to purge thousands of words it assimilated through the centuries from dialects, Islamic and European languages to create the ultimate template for a Shuddh sanitized Hindi. It is ironic that while daggers are being drawn on both sides over the language issue since BJP reignited it, the young in the Hindi belt are abandoning Hindi en masse for English. Parents, including most vociferous supporters of the BJP leadership and Hindi when it comes to their own children, will root for an English medium education in relatively expensive private schools. Critics of Hindi must talk more to Hindi writers. And it's a pity today that most of our incisive historians, social scientists, philologists, and feminists continue to write their well researched books exclusively in English. And those who are from the non Hindi speaking areas, while cursing Hindi imposition, will not introspect honestly to why they have failed to write their own books in their native Bangla. As for literary historians of Hindi and Urdu, they too have reimagined, trapped in writing angry competing historical narratives for Hindi and Urdu. A calm, composite, comprehensive history of Indian literature that spans both Hindi and Urdu as people's language, differing in little but in scripts, has yet to be written. How can the regressive and divisive policies we thought we had buried come back to haunt us and threaten to be our future? The answer lies in one of the cruelest questions Krishna asks Gandhari as she curses him for causing the death of her sons, "Chir, why wail, O brave Kshatri queen, over that which your own arrogant and deliberate myopia has preordained?" It's pity today that most of the incisive historians, social scientists, philologists continue to write their well researched books exclusively in English, and those who are from non Hindi speaking areas, while cursing Hindi imposition, will not introspect honestly as to why they have failed to write their own books and their native Bangla, Tamil, Kannada, and Odia. As for literary historians of Hindi and Urdu, they too have remained trapped in writing angry, competing historical narratives for Hindi and Urdu, a calm, composite, comprehensive history of Indian literature that spans both Hindi and Urdu as people's language, just differing in little but in scripts has yet to be written. How can the regressive and divisive policies we thought we had buried come back to haunt us and threaten to be our future? Gender barrier. This refers to the editorial The Women's Hour. A study by International Labour Organization corroborates that unpaid work is the most critical barriers preventing women from joining and continuing in the workforce. There is a need to recognize women's unpaid work and invest in inclusive care economy. This refers to the editorial The Women's Hour. The Time Youth Survey 2024 has exposed how women suffer disadvantages on account of gender division of labor. They are found to spend more time on unpaid domestic chores and caregiving, which constrains their potential for economic mobility and forces them to settle for low paid or part time informal work. The question is, who is supposed to remunerate women for domestic work? Should it be family head in a typical household, or is it to be considered an essential service for the nation and paid by the state? When the Bolivians, the showdown in the Oval Office was not a spectacle but a realist picture of what is at stake. Vladimir Zelensky grossly misread the room. He tired antics of portraying Vladimir Putin as the devil spectacularly backfired on him. In the space of few minutes, Donald Trump and JD Vance dismantled the mechanism of the puppet that he had has become owing to Western support. Both Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer, who preceded him in their visits to the White House, were embodiments of tact and diplomacy. Zelensky's act of defiance could only have been masked by dressing down he received. He effectively became Jean de La Fontaine's frog who wished to be as big as the ox. This refers to the article When the Bully Wins. The manner in which US President Donald Trump and Vice President JD Vance treated Vladimir Zelensky at the White House is definitely a pointer to the arrogance of right wing armed twisters. It was foolish of him to expect Zelensky to sign an agreement without offering any security guarantees. The challenge for European leaders is to pacify US President and stop him from rushing headlong into a deal skewed in Russia's favor. Mapping her work, more rural women are now self-employed. Reasons for this shift are unclear. In education for the real world, the US has prioritized theatrics over security commitments in a volatile world. New UGC guidelines will address disconnect between academia and industry, bridge the gap between universities and the job market. For a long time, the inability of Indian higher educational institutions to generate job oriented skill courses in BA, BCom, BSc programs, these attract a significant share of students in higher education has significantly impacted employability of graduates. Outdated curricula, regulatory inertia, and substantial disconnect between academia and industry were immediate reasons for this shortcoming. However, with the introduction of National Education Policy 2020, regulators such as UGC are facilitating transformation in higher education through innovative regulations framework and guidelines. Recently, UGC announced comprehensive guidelines to incorporate skill-based education and micro-nano credentials as part of the degree programs offered by higher education institutions. These guidelines, aligned with NEP 2020, extol skill and experimental education, aim to overhaul the conventional educational framework and bridge the gap between academic learning and the job market. The most reasonable path for students to seize opportunities in the high demand and emerging areas is by acquiring credits in the high skill courses as part of the regular degree programs. This enhances employability without burdening the students with extra academic stress. A core feature of the UGC guidelines is permitting students to plan their learning by designing personalized educational journeys and earning stackable credits by choosing courses from academic disciplines and skill domains through the National Credits Framework. The guidelines allow students to earn micro or nano credentials through flexible and multidisciplinary learning pathways. Incorporating micro nano credentials in regular degree programs is a progressive way to provide targeted learning development opportunities to students specializing in specific competencies. UGC guidelines advise the Indian enterprises or MNCs who desire to offer skill based courses can submit their proposals to the UGC. A committee comprising subject experts and industry representatives will evaluate the proposals based on their adherence to UGC guidelines and quality standards. Courses approved by the UGC are listed on the SWAYAM Plus platform and linked to the Academic Bank of Credits, making them accessible to students nationwide. The UGC's comprehensive assessment framework for skill-based courses and the micro credential emphasizes a structured multi-tiered approach to evaluating students' competencies through internal and external assessments. Its guidelines recommend diverse areas for skill-based courses and micro credentials. The principal areas advised by the UGC include advanced technologies such as AI, blockchain, machine learning, cybersecurity, robotics, and data analytics courses. This will equip students with skills in high demand sectors. Skill based courses in traditional crafts, textile, tourism, and hospitality management programs could support regional economic growth in areas with rich cultural heritage. Micro credentials in communication, leadership, and entrepreneurship ensure students develop essential soft skills, enabling success in diverse professional environments. The UGC guidelines encourage higher education students to align their skill with the UGC guideline encourage higher education institutions to align their skill related courses with national priorities and local strengths. These institutions must therefore identify specific industry demands in their area and choose skill based courses accordingly. For example, institutions in regions with agricultural sectors might offer agri-tech or sustainable farming courses, while those in financial hubs could focus on fintech related courses. By using localized approach, by using the localized approach, higher education institutions could ensure their education aligns with regional economic development, and the adoption of these guidelines by higher education institutions could place Indian higher education on par with international standards by adopting global best practices in competency based evaluation, blended learning, and collaborative assessments, and ensuring that Indian graduates are globally competitive. A closer examination of the challenges of graduate unemployability today provides a deep sense of why skill based courses must be an integral part of degree programs. Regrettably, some academicians stick to an archaic view of higher education as purely academic pursuit rather than possibility of making students career ready. Because of unjustified misconceptions, they view the introduction of skill-based education as a dilution of intellectual scope of traditional degree programs, perpetuating an elitist mindset that prioritizes theoretical knowledge over practical application. Their resistance to change in higher education harms students and undermines India's progress. The understanding that it is impossible to carry on one's way into the future with stagnant educational framework should caution the necessity to transform higher education. Considering the potential of skill-based courses, considering the potential of skill-based courses to enhance student employability, more Indian higher education institutions must operate with accountability for the outcome of their graduates. Higher education institution administrators must work towards creating value for our students. They should remain concerned about whether students secure employment after completing their degrees or if they are forcing the students to pursue costly additional training to become employable. To overcome the existing mindset that constrains pragmatism, higher education institutions must rethink restructure faculty roles, and speedily integrate industry-relevant skill-based courses into regular degree programs. As much as it challenges higher education institutions to free themselves from the conventional way of imparting education, this approach has real value. One thing is clear: higher education institutions must realize that our students deserve more than obsolete degrees. They, they merit an education that invigorates them to succeed in the real world. Mapping her work, more rural women are now self employed. The reasons for the shift are unclear. The latest rounds of the periodic labor force survey shows that overall employment, particularly self-employment among rural women, has increased significantly since 2017-18. Most of these women report being helpers in a home-based enterprise. This increase in women's time allocated to income generating work begs the question: how and where are women saving time and reallocating the saved time to work? Women spend majority of their daily time cooking as shown in by the 2019 Time Use Survey of India, a granular 24-hour time use survey of almost 3,000 primary cooks in households in rural Indore by many co-authors, and I find that 60 hours of time spent on domestic work by rural women per week, the majority, more than 40 hours, is spent on cooking and cleaning, almost 4 hours per week, 4 hours per day on average, which is equivalent to a part-time job. Almost 75% of these women use firewood and cow dung for cooking, which not only makes cooking and cleaning more time consuming, but also exposes these women to cardiovascular and lung diseases during indoor smoke inhalation. Could the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana program have increased the home productivity of rural women and reduced the time they spend on cooking and fuel collection? In the same survey, we asked the primary cooks what fuel they used for cooking the last meal. along with estimating the time taken to cook the entire meal for the family. Comparing the average time taken by the primary cook to prepare the last meal for the family in households that do not have LPG access and therefore use solid fuels or traditional chulha for cooking versus households that have LPG access, we find that it takes approximately 30 minutes. Comparing the time taken by the primary cook to prepare the last meal for the family in households that do not have LPG access and therefore use solid fuel or traditional chulha for cooking versus the households that have LPG access, we find that time taken it takes approximately 30 minutes less to prepare a meal if LPG is used. Subsequently, when households and without LPG connections are matched on similar characteristics, including income, the time use data shows lower time spent on fuel collection and fuel making by women in households. So, however, we find no increase in time spent by these women on income generating work, either work for pay or as helpers in household enterprises in households with LPG access, but almost all the daily time saved is reallocated to leisure, about 20 minutes per day, while LPG indeed improve women's welfare. Why do we not observe an increase in their labor force participation? First, it is worth noting that fuel collection is an activity undertaken once a week or about 4 times a month by all most rural households. Hence, a shift to LPG does not entail daily time saving. Second, 20 to 30 minutes daily time saving from cooking is not sufficient for women to step out of home and take a full time job. Importantly, how do we value this time that women are saving daily of about 30 minutes approximately? In rural areas, paid work available is primarily manual and low wages. Potential saving of 30 minutes estimated is valued at about 5% of rural monthly household income. Given the rural daily wage for unskilled manual labor corresponding to these women's primary level of education and lack of vocational and technical skills. Average female employment rate in the context is only 15% and primarily in agricultural self-employment. Hence, these households do not have large incentive to save women time in cooking and fuel collection by shifting regular use of LPG. Clean cooking technology, either LPG or induction, is unlikely to save large chunks of time in one go to allow women to work full time and bring in substantial amount of income to the household. The disincentives for adopting clean technology are heightened by the fact that typically it is men who make decisions about the purchase of LPG fills, and the low bargaining power of these women further binds them to use dirty fuels. At the global crossroads, can Europe find the path that ensures Ukraine's security and its own and bear the cost? When President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine met President Donald Trump and Vice President JD Vance in the Oval Office on February 28, a curious feature was that this meeting was held under the full glare of the press replete with cameras. The conversation with Trump, Vance, and Zelensky started out amicably enough with Trump welcoming him to the White House. However, when a reporter from the press pool asked Vance a question, matters quickly unraveled. Vance proceeded to disparage the Biden administration's policies towards Ukraine and then suggested that Trump was offering a diplomatic pathway to end the war. When Zelensky intervened, questioning Trump's diplomatic efforts, as is now well known, matters quickly became heated, soon degenerating into a three-way exchange of harsh words. A lunch that had been planned for the Ukrainian presidential delegation was left untouched as Zelensky left the White House upset and no doubt shocked and dismayed. In its wake, the vast majority of Republican politicians have supported the Trump administration and seem nonchalant about the obvious diplomatic contempts, and most in fact chose to criticize Zelensky. A rare exception was Senator James Lamford of Oklahoma, who sharply criticized Russian President Putin on a national television show on Sunday. Nevertheless, he found occasion to support Trump's efforts to start a dialogue with Moscow to end the war. If anyone following this administration's approach to the brutal war in Ukraine had any lingering doubts about its stance, the Trump-Vance meeting with Zelensky should have effectively ended them. For Trump, forging a working relationship with Putin is far more important than standing an ally in dire need of American diplomatic and military support. The reasons for Trump's willingness to reach a reapproachment with Putin do not need one to resort to any squalid conspiracy theories. Indeed, at least three key factors can be easily adduced. First, Trump has a clear penchant for authoritarian leaders, ranging from Putin in Russia to Viktor Orban in Hungary. He had, during his first term in office, expressed admiration for Xi Jinping, even as he had been at odds with the People's Republic of China on a host of issues. Second, though unstated, it is not difficult to infer that he sees Putin as a fellow Christian, white nationalist compatriot. And third, at a very different level of geopolitics, Trump and some of his key foreign policy advisors believe that reaching an understanding with Russia might enable Washington to help undermine the growing closeness between Moscow and Beijing. If pursuing these goals requires breaking with European allies and abandoning Ukraine, it is evident that the current administration has few, if any, qualms in pursuing this strategy. If the likes of President Emmanuel Macron of France and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the UK has entertained hopes that they could charm and flatter Trump to restrain, if not dispense with worst instinct, the recent meeting with Zelensky has put paid to such pipe dreams. In the wake of the very public diplomatic meltdown, what ramifications ensure for both Europe and Ukraine, it is already more than evident that, with predictable exceptions, major European countries are now rallying around Zelensky. Giorgia Meloni, the right wing Prime Minister of Italy, to no particular surprise, has urged Zelensky to go back and try to repair relations with Trump. However, from Starmer to Macron and beyond, there has been a clear expression of solidarity with Ukraine. Olaf Scholz, the outgoing German Chancellor, at the Conference on the Security of Ukraine in London, reiterated his country's support for Ukraine's sovereignty and made clear that the war could not end on Russia's terms. After the end of the World War II, despite occasional vicissitudes stemming mostly from policy differences, the transatlantic alliance had endured. It had weathered some serious crises, most notably when France and the United Kingdom had embarked upon the little inconceived and ill-fated invasion of the Suez in 1956. In its wake, Sir Anthony Eden The British Prime Minister felt compelled to resign using the subterfuge of ill health. However, after the crisis has ended, transatlantic relationship, including the special relationship with UK, moved on. In the wake of if pursuing these goals require breaking with European allies and abandoning Ukraine, it is evident that the current administration has few, if any, qualms in pursuing the strategy. If the likes of President Macron of France and Prime Minister Starmer of Ukraine correction, United Kingdom has entertained hopes that they could charm and flatter Trump to restrain, if not dispense with his worst instincts. The recent meeting with Zelensky has put paid to such pipe dreams. In the wake of very public diplomatic meltdown, what ramifications ensure for both Europe and Ukraine, it is already more than evident that with predictable exceptions, the major European countries are now rallying around Zelensky. Giorgia Meloni, right-wing Prime Minister of Italy, and to particular surprise has urged Zelensky to go back and try to repair relations with Trump. However, from Starmer to Macron and beyond, there has been a clear expression of solidarity with Ukraine. Olaf Scholz, the outgoing German Chancellor, at the Conference on the Security of Ukraine in London, reiterated the country's support for Ukraine's sovereignty and made clear that the war could not end on Russia's terms. After the deal of the After the end of the World War II, despite occasional vicissitudes stemming mostly from political policy differences, the transatlantic alliance had endured. It had even weathered some serious crises, most notably when France and the United Kingdom has embarked upon ill-conceived and ill-fated invasion of the Suez in 1956. In its wake, Sir Anthony Eden, the British Prime Minister, felt compelled to resign using the subterfuge of ill health. However, so it is more than evident with predictable exceptions that major European countries are now rallying around Zelensky. Giorgia Meloni of Italy, to particular surprise, has urged Zelensky to go back and try relations with Trump, repair relations with Trump. However, from Starmer to Macron and beyond, there have been clear expression of solidarity with Ukraine. Olaf Scholz, outgoing chancellor, at the Conference on Security of Ukraine in London, reiterated his country's support for Ukraine's sovereignty and made clear that the war could not end on Russia's terms. After the World War II, despite occasional vicissitudes stemming mostly from political policy differences, transatlantic alliances had endured. It had even weathered some serious crises, most notably when France and UK had embarked upon an ill-conceived and ill-fated invasion of the Suez in 1956. In its wake, Sir Anthony Eden, the British Prime Minister, felt compelled to resign using the subterfuge of ill health. However, after the crisis had ended, the transatlantic relationship, including the special relationship with the United Kingdom, moved on. More recently, several European countries, most significantly Germany, had been at odds with the George W. Bush administration's decision to invade Iraq. Yet again, after a period of frostiness, ties between Europe and United States were only restored, but not only restored but strengthened. In the wake of Trump's unwillingness to protect Ukraine, his fickle readiness to erect a swath of trade barriers in the form of tariffs on European goods while constantly shielding European allies for not sharing what he deems to be their fair share of defense burden, most of Europe is now concluding that America is, at least under Trump, simply cannot be seen as a trustworthy and reliable ally and a partner. The strategic transformation that is underway is nothing short of the political equivalent of a tectonic shift. Starmer, when unveiling a four-step plan for Ukraine at a conference in London, did not exaggerate the gravity of the situation when he said we are at the crossroads in history. Whether most of democratic Europe can take the fork in the road or that despite the cost that it will have to bear, guarantees the security of Ukraine and the continent remains the key question that will be addressed in the next few weeks and months. In the full public glare, Oval Office showdown shrinks space for all players at global high table. Each one will have to figure out their way forward. One of the key tenets of diplomacy is that differences between countries should be dealt in private and agreement signed in public. This is necessary to ensure and protect room for maneuver for all players. On Friday at the Oval Office in the White House, however, the opposite was on display. Differences, political, geopolitical, personal, between US President Donald Trump and Vice President JD Vance on one side and Ukrainian embattled leader Volodymyr Zelensky on the other were aired in full global view. The agreement on providing the US access to rare earth minerals is now on a back burner. The meeting, which saw Vance and Trump attack the Ukrainian president for not saying thank you and all but bullied for not having the cards, is important for its implications for the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and broader European security. It is also an illustration of a more fundamental disruption in the Trump era of a diplomacy as usual. A more fundamental disruption of diplomacy as usual. The speed with which Trump had upended Washington's position on Ukraine and diminished the transatlantic alliance that had left many stunned. Clearly, the US's external orientation is now visible, informed by Trump's domestic political compulsions. The attack on Zelensky reiterated issues that have become part and parcel of Trump Vance camp's appeal to the MAGA base. That the American taxpayer is subsiding Ukraine's war and Europe's activity in this anti-interventionist pitch, Zelensky has been painted as a prime antagonist. It also appears that Trump is willing, if not quite ready, to pull the plug on US support in the continent. This rapid unsettling of transatlantic alliance in place since World War II has placed Europe in a profound crisis. Soon after Zelensky left the US, a summit level meeting of European leaders was held in London, in which UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Macron spoke of an alternative peace plan for Ukraine, which they will present to Washington. Another special summit for Ukraine and European defense is to be held in Brussels on March 6. Two things are clear from the reaction in Europe since the Trump Zelensky meeting fiasco. First, Europe must be ready to do more of heavy lifting, with Washington threatening to withdraw from its role as a security provider. And second, for all the voices in support of Ukraine and Zelensky, Europe realizes that it still needs the US for any peace plan to succeed. The public attack on Zelensky and its aftermath is an indication that international relations are going through a churn in both form and substance. Given that the US continues to be preeminent economic and military powers, leaders and diplomats must now learn to deal with volatility and politicization of interstate ties. Volatility and politicization of interstate ties. In Europe, the task appears to be one of developing new architecture for how it approaches the world and its place in it. The US may no longer be everywhere on the global stage to back it up. It must find ways to engage with Russia on its terms and more broadly make its agreements with other powers even as it tries to keep the channel open across the Atlantic. Small film, big cinema. Anora's Oscar triumph is a win for indie films that touch without trying too hard. So serious are the Oscars about themselves that it is only four times that a film that has taken both the Cannes Film Festival Best Honor go on to more edgy, experimental, and foreign cinema and academies. The last one was Parasite in 2019, and before it happened in 1955 on Monday, Anora joined the list. Even in the August company, Anora is an exception, with explicit content that usually leaves the Academy cold, and its unusually humanizing depictions of the group Russians whose path crossed with a tutelar character. Hollywood has rarely accorded them such warmth in the mainstream film. As Anora proceeds, it trot at 2 hours and 19 minutes compared to some of its more serious and heavy on the feet contenders. None of them sticks to form. Anora, or Annie as she prefers to be called, is neither the sex worker with a heavy heart of gold nor with a pot of bad luck. She is an anti Cinderella and anti Pretty Women, a 23-year-old who isn't looking out for a fairy grandmother or Prince Charming. The only crystal on her is a shining diamond ring that she demands from Evan, who turns out to be riding like all princes are on their on his parents' coattails. Mikey Madison, just 25, and the Best Actress winner is phenomenal at the guts as the gutsy, feisty, fearless Annie, who confounds the Russian princess, Russian keepers, trying hopelessly to keep her down or to keep Ivan up. Literally, large part of the film is shot in New York quarters inhabited by Russians, with Annie herself partly Russian. It would so easy to paint them as the usual gruff, cruel, bloodthirsty Russians or lossless migrants who run rampant through Emilia Preres who are apparently threatening America's cities. However, in Sean Baker's hilarious script, they are much powerless cogs in the wheel as in Annie. They are sent scurrying as the command of the Russian oligarch who flies in and out of America on a jet unhindered by any sanctions, showing that money oils all wheels. It's amidst the urgency to get a divorce, another of film's ironies, that the drama and romance of Anora blossoms as snowfall engulfs a car in which last scene unfolds. This could be as much a dream that may a first ray of sun or a start of a new day. On the night that Anora took 5 Academy Awards, Yuriv Borisov, the watchful, almost silent, completely disposable henchman, who is the only one who comes remotely close to the heart of gold in the film, lost out to Best Supporting Actor. As geopolitics goes, notwithstanding President Donald Trump's full tilt at the windmills, there is only so far the Oscars could have gone with Borisov. His nomination was celebrated back home in Russia as a victory of Olympian magnitude. For the most part, though, Monday proved that Academy could rise above constraints beyond art to recognize an indie film made on a budget of 6 million. Last year's Best Picture Oppenheimer ran up $100 million. That touches without trying too hard, for example, not going much into the hard lives of sex workers or easy lives of princelings. Of the 9 other films in contention for Best Picture, one dealt with the dirty Vatican power play between the selection of Pope Conclave seemed right, another with the stark cruelties of war and brutalist, more of academic style. Third adapted the popular Broadway play, crowd favorite Wicked, and fourth was a grand spectacle as well as a hard-working sequel, a maid overwhelmed Dune 2. Fifth was a polished biopic of Bob Dylan, a complete unknown substance. Emilia Perez and I am still here about Brazil's forced disappearances. So, Abajan BSP leader Mayawati's decision to expel her nephew draws attention to beleaguered party BSP's continued internal disarray combined with unchecked electoral decline has dulled the luster of a party that once held out a radical promise of representation and empowerment of the most marginalized. Its failure is writ large in times when questions of social justice riding on renewed demands of caste census has resurfaced. Mayawati's party has neither been able to frame a fresh narrative of inclusive politics, as is once did through social engineering experiments. It is Bhaichara Sammelans or the shift from Bahujan to Sarvjan. The BSP has marked many firsts in the Indian politics. Khasi Ram's emergence as a Dalit icon in the 1980s and the dominance of the Dalit Panthers in the discourse argued for the importance of strategic alliances. Rise of Dalit women as the Chief Minister of India's most politically influenced state, renaming of institutions to commemorate Dalit icons, the installation of statues of Ambedkar in public parks, all these were not only strategies in mobilize the Dalits, but also help open up public spaces and acknowledge the exclusions that has long been inscribed and routinized in them. Mayawati's outreach to upper caste took it to the zenith in 2007 assembly election when it received 30% vote share. In Uttar Pradesh, parties fall to 12% in 22 assembly election and 9% in 24 Lok Sabha election calls for an urgent introspection. BJP has been challenged by the BJP's BSP has been challenged by the BJP's purposeful and organized outreach to non-Jatavs and Jatav Dalits. Chandrasekhar Azad's Raman energetic claims on Khasi Ram's legacy and SP's politics of Pichda Dalit and Alpsankhyak, but it has been debilitated more by its own weaknesses and hesitations. Parties' inability to put together larger coalitions, for instance, a strategy that delivered for it in the past, has taken a toll. Khasiram's politics showed why Ambedkar called political power the master key, but that could only be achieved by agile politics and the framing of new electoral strategies. Best documentary Oscar for No Other Land about dispossession of Palestinian community offers hope. UAE executes UP women convicted last year on infant killing. MEA to High Court. Uttarakhand. Liquor shops near religious places to lose license. Karnataka IPS officer shifted day after she accused senior of planting files. Number of women seeking retail credit nearly trebles in 5 years. Women's share in business loan and gold loans has increased by 14% and 6%, while credit supply to women in businesses climbed. Majority of loans availed by them are against loan. However, women borrowers continue to face challenges to accessing credit such as credit uh, aversion, poor banking experiences, barriers to credit readiness, and constraints around collaterals. Credit for personal finance continues to be a major share of loans. The number of women borrowers availing retail credit has increased as a CAGR of 22% in the last 5 years ended 2024. This reflects a significant shift in financial behavior with women increasingly leveraging credit to meet personal and professional goals. Significantly, around 60% of women borrowers who availed credit from semi urban or rural areas, a report by TransUnion Sibyl said. Cooperation in critical minerals academic exchanges on agenda. Report released by TransUnion Sibyl and Niti Aayog said. Cooperation in critical minerals academia exchanges on agenda. At a time when US, India and US are stepping bilateral agreement on critical minerals, top American official has visited India to operationalize cooperation between two countries in advanced research in this sector. Visit comes after Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, where India and US launched the Trust Initiative, which aims to focus on recovery and processing of critical minerals including lithiums and rare earth elements. In addition to Trust Initiative, Visit also operationalized the Compact Initiative. Dr. Lagrasso's visit outlined a clear roadmap for future cooperation, which includes launching a bidirectional student exchange program and a lab-to-lab agreement between Iowa State University. Trump reiterates focus on virtual digital assets, backs five coins for crypto reserve. He named Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and Cardano. Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and Cardano all swiftly jumped after the announcement. In a post on his Truth social media site Truth Social, a US crypto reserve will elevate this critical industry after years of corrupt attacks by the Biden administration. Race to secure copper, decoding India recent moves by India, China, US. Securing of 9,000 square kilometer block cobalt and in the region in Zambia known for high-grade deposits. With production of domestic mines faltering, project is crucial step for India to establish overseas mining operations. On February 25, White House warned in the fact sheet on threat to national security from imports of copper that over-reliance on foreign copper could jeopardize US defense capabilities. With the supply of copper tightening, China is moving to reining smelting overcapacity. Companies looking to build new smelters must secure long-term contracts with copper mines with DRC, Chile, and Peru. With the demand for copper led by EV, electric vehicle batteries, and clean energy technologies, copper is listed as a critical mineral in India. Domestic overproduction was 3.78 million tons, 8% lower than in 2018-19. While India has large copper deposits, they require extensive exploration before mining can commence. Globally, it takes up to 17 years on average to operationalize a copper mine. To meet demand in the short term, India has been looking to secure both greenfield and minefield mineral assets in Zambia, Chile, and DRC. Deposits in these countries. Further, Zambia is the seventh largest producer of copper in the world. Chile, Peru, and DRC are number 1, 2, 3 respectively. Canada-based First Quantum Minerals and China state-owned non-ferrous metal mining are among the largest producers of copper in the country. India's Ministry of Mines is working through nodal officers in DRC, Tanzania, and Mozambique and Rwanda to acquire more critical minerals. Europe draws up Ukraine's ceasefire plans. Trump says Zelensky doesn't want peace. UK says many proposals on table. Europe agrees to send troops but calls for US support in some form. Britain said on Monday that there were several possible proposals on the table for a possible Ukraine ceasefire after France floated a proposal for a month-long initial truce that could pave the way for peace talks. European countries led by Britain and France are looking options for peace proposal, including Ukraine after last week's Oval Office rupture between US Presidential Trump, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. There are clearly number of options on the table. So we welcome Europe stepping up for Europe, but they have to also invest in capabilities to do so. France, Britain, and potentially other European countries have offered to send troops to Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire, but they say they want support from the US, a proposal referred to as backstop. Zelensky says ceasefire must come with explicit security guarantees from the West to ensure that Russia does not attack again. Trump, meanwhile, said Monday that America will not put up with it for much longer, pointing to recent comments made by Zelensky about the end of the war with Russia. In a post on Truth Social, quoting Zelensky as saying, "End of war is very, very far away," Trump said, "This is worst statement that could have been made by Zelensky. This guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing and Europe." In the meeting they had with Zelensky stated flatly that they cannot do the job without US. Starmer hosted a summit of European leaders in London. They had agreed to drop a Ukraine peace plan to present to the US, floated a 1 month ceasefire. So far, has been no public endorsement from the other allies. Such a truce on air, sea, and energy infrastructure would allow us to determine if Russian President Putin is acting in good faith, French Foreign Minister Jean Noel Barrot said, and that's when real peace negotiations could start. Kremlin spokesperson Peskov said on Monday attempts by the US and Russia will clearly not be enough to end the fighting. An important element is missing. He implied Russia could now push for harder bargain than it did during the failed peace talks in 22, in which Kiev rejected the demands of Ukraine adopting a neutral status, not joining NATO, limiting the size of its armed forces, and granting the special status to East Ukraine. Supreme Court upholds Khalida Zia in corruption case. PM protecting the freedom key to talks with King. Ukraine trade talks on table as Jaishankar visits UK today. France proposes Russia-Ukraine truce for 1 month. Britain distances itself. Days after UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer hosted an emergency meeting of European leaders in support of Ukraine and its President Zelensky after the latter's public slowdown with US President Trump, External Affairs Minister is headed to London to meet the British government's leadership, including former Secretary David Lammy. After the acrimonious meeting between US President Trump and Zelensky, London summit signaled support for Kiev, with the world's gaze on Europe's next steps. S. Jaishankar's visit will be watched, and Delhi's diplomatic tightrope walk would be put to test. Why markets fall hurts equity, a mass product, spread deep and wide. India and UK share a comprehensive strategic partnership which has strengthened across diverse areas including defense, security, trade and economy. During the visit, External Affairs Minister will be holding discussions with his counterpart, Foreign Secretary David Lammy, and will meet several other dignitaries as well as Indian community members, while Jaishankar's 6-day visit beginning Tuesday was scheduled earlier. His meetings will be closely watched in the backdrop of the meeting hosted by Starmer to shore up support for Ukraine on Sunday. Starmer, who met Zelensky on Saturday, has said that Britain, on Ukraine, France, and some countries would form a coalition of the willing and draw a peace plan to take Trump. Delhi airports get AI-enabled system to streamline operations. The Unified Total Airside Management, new AI-powered system. Unified Total Airside Management, Unified Total Airside Management, Unified Total Airside Management. The new AI-powered system has been launched by the Delhi Airport DIAL, operator of IGIA, in collaboration with Akasa Air. Other airlines will be onboarded in the phased manner. UTAM, a Unified Total Airside Management, Unified Total Airside Management allows air staff to see the location of aircraft and support vehicles like baggage carts, fuel trucks. If there are any delays, the system immediately alerts the staff so they can take quick action. It also monitors the time ground support equipment takes to complete tasks, ensuring that services like baggage loading and aircraft refueling happens on schedule. UTM enables operators to monitor aircraft movement, ground service equipment, and vehicle activity. Unified airside, unified airside, unified total airside management, total airside management, total airside management, total airside management, unified total airside management, total airside management. Airports to get international status. CM Dhami also unveiled plan for new township near Dehradun. Report suggests rethink on quota for Muslims, highlights lost political relevance, subcategorization of the OBC reservation category to include Muslims, bringing in Dalit Muslims and Christians under the scheduled caste quota, and re-evaluation of the existing fees 50% ceiling on a rational basis. These are among the key suggestions of a report titled Rethinking Affirmative Action for Muslims in Contemporary India that was released on February 5 by the Center for Development Policy and Practice in collaboration with the US India Policy Institute. A third of India will be obese. One of the key reasons is the increasing consumption of high processed foods, high in salt, sugar, and fat. Multinational food and beverage corporations and fast food chains are shifting their investments from high income countries to low and middle income countries. Diplomacy N is the art of letting somebody else have your way. David Frost. So that's all for today. See you in the next one.